Well, my story began in 1974. I was incarcerated in 1974, and I was released in January the 7th, 1985. It was very tough. When I got out in 1985, I got out and I had a $25 check with no ID. And I went around and tried to cash the check, and it had the state of Georgia Department of Corrections on it, and nobody would touch it. Once I got out, and it was very tough to find sustainable employment. I could find employment washing dishes and pumping gas. At that time, I had a job pumping gas where I would ride the train for 2 hours one way just to pump gas for $5 an hour. Finding sustainable employment was a really, really tough thing for me because a lot of people wouldn't even talk to me. And so that was one of my toughest barriers, but also the barrier of not seeing that it was possible. That mental prison of impossibilities is the prison that I fought the hardest to break away from. Education does not guarantee you a job, but it does allow you to put your name in the hat of opportunity. And so I began to see what was possible at that point, and I graduated summa cum laude. Now I'm able to put my name in the hat, but at that point there was no hat. Still wasn't a hat that would allow you to really take your degree and apply for sustainable jobs. Then a year later, in 2013, I was able to work with the Georgia Center for Opportunity on a prisoner reentry working group. Little did I know that that would change my life dramatically in a lot of different ways. Because in that working group, it further helped me to understand that I had value, that my prison experience had value. My experience had a significance on the recommendations that they was making. 2015 is a very special day for me because that's when the governor signed the ban the box policy. Ban the box in terms of the criminal being able to take that box off where you had to check that I'm convicted of a crime. Because that allowed you to be able to put your name in the hat of opportunity to be able to explain to the prospective employer or have a conversation with the prospective employer that you had value, that you was bringing something to the table. Prior to that, you couldn't even get that chance to do that. So now blessed to be the State Field Director for Prison Fellowship Ministries, advocating their second prison project.
One thing of note, Tony, who was featured on our last video, is also a board member of Georgia Center for Opportunity and a phenomenal leader in our community and so valuable to the work that we do at GCO, but such an inspiring story. And I would say so inspiring that what Randy mentioned earlier about hiring well, doing good, and the work that the prisoner reentry panel worked on was really the genesis of getting this program started. My name is Bill Rogers, and I'm the Vice President of Workforce Solutions at GCO and also a recovering CEO. And during my career as a CEO of managing companies from hundreds of employees to tens of thousands of employees, the one thing that was always the biggest challenge was finding good workers. And didn't matter what the economy was like, didn't matter whether we were in a high unemployment, challenging economic times, or whether we were experiencing low unemployment, finding good employees was always something that was a challenge. People would always ask, what would keep you up at night? And that would always be my answer, was finding good employees. And so fast forward to the work that we're doing at GCO, and specifically with Hiring Well, Doing Good. And this is an initiative that is focused on at the community level of partnering with community leaders, with nonprofit service providers, as well as the business community within that area, to try and focus on those individuals that have fallen through the cracks. You know, most of us in this room have had a varying careers of going from one company to another or one organization to the other, because as we talked about earlier, that term of social capital, we've established a network, we understand how things happen, and as a result, we've been able to navigate those waters. However, what we find is in so many communities, there is a large percent of the population, much larger than I think most of us would recognize, that don't have that social capital, that don't know how to navigate, and essentially don't have the basic skills necessary to get that job, to put themselves in a position to grow towards self-sufficiency and to be able to provide for their families. And so the Hiring Well, Doing Good initiative is focused on that part of the population, to go into the communities and partner, identify who these folks are, and do two primary things. First and foremost is to understand what kind of barriers they have. What are those barriers that are preventing them from getting engaged in the community from a working perspective? Could be something as simple as, I have children and I have no way of providing childcare for them, or I have no transportation capabilities to get to even an interview, or I'm homeless. I don't have housing options that will provide for me to have any kind of stability associated with that, or I have had an unfortunate situations occur that I have a criminal record, and I now find it very difficult for organizations to accept me coming in. And so what we do is we're partnering locally to, first of all, identify at the individual level what those barriers are and work towards overcoming those barriers, providing them the support that is necessary. The second aspect of this program is dealing with skills. Not so much technical skills, but more soft skills. You know, we find that someone's ability not only to gain a job, but then also progress within an organization is based on their ability to have and manage their own soft skills. And so we will put folks through an assessment to help understand where they are with their soft skills. And then we have over 60 training programs ready to be able to work with them on improving those soft skills, whether it's pre-employment or whether it's post-employment, and looking to continue to improve themselves. So our panel today are a group of organizations that fit into those categories, whether it be providers that are working out in the community or businesses that are focused on hiring. So Michael, Donell, and Brooke, I thank you first for being with us today. And I'd like you just, if you wouldn't mind, and we'll go ladies first on this one, please introduce yourself, give a little bit of your background, and then also talk a little bit about the organization that you're with and the focus that you have in kind of your area of responsibility.
Good morning. I've got a little bit of a cold, so y'all bear with me. But my name is Brooke Perez, and I have the great pleasure of representing Georgia Power's education and workforce development team today. And I say represent because up until about 6 weeks ago, I was on that team, and I've since taken a new opportunity, sort of in a sister group right next door. But we've had a lot of great work going on in that space for many years, and it's going to continue. For me personally, I've always had a passion for this space. So to be able to do it on behalf of Georgia Power was kind of a dream come true. Like, okay, this is a great brand and we do so many great things in the community, and how can we take that to the next level? So that's a little bit about me and our organization. If you've engaged with Georgia Power on any level, our motto is we're a citizen wherever we serve, and we take that really seriously. So whether it's helping our communities through philanthropy, through leadership, and certainly through lifting up and out of poverty, we're heavily invested in that space, and I'm proud to represent that work here today.
There we are. Morning. My name is Donell Woodson. I am lead consultant with Focused Community Strategies, or FCS. I come to my work at FCS via formal city planning world and stepping back into faith-based non-profit to lead the community development arm of consultancy for us. Our organization is 40 years old and based in the urban epicenter here in Atlanta. Our founder's inspiration is really deeply rooted in wanting to care for the individual, and then the discovery that in caring for one need of the individual, there were multiple thereafter, and after which that program and practices of this one-way model of giving were paternalistic and toxic in nature. And so what was family counseling services moved to focused community strategies. And so our work moves beyond meeting the individual need or perceived need at the moment to thinking about the thriving and flourishing of the whole neighborhood, and thus caring for all individuals and all families.
Michael Jones. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Thrive Farmers, started in 2011. That was after a 30-year entrepreneurial journey where I started 6 companies and had really chased all the things that the world told me were important, money, achievement, success. Found myself at 40 years old feeling pretty empty after realizing that each of those milestones didn't really fill my heart, and went on a search for purpose. I had a faith journey that had begun about 10 years prior, and so those converged. And while I was on sabbatical, my heart got broken. I learned about an injustice in the coffee world. I'd been an enjoyer of coffee here, but had never really thought about where it came from. And I had the opportunity, because my wife's father is a coffee farmer in Jamaica, to investigate that industry, really just as something to keep my mind busy while I was on this sabbatical. And during that process, learned that farmers of coffee, and frankly, most of other agricultural crops around the world, are struggling to make enough money to support their families. They are disconnected from the value of the product they produce. And so at a time where coffee is more valuable and more in demand than it's ever been in the world, and the U.S. is the largest consumer of coffee, I realized that something needed to be done. So I really felt a calling that while my background had been healthcare and finance, that this is where I was planted. So I turned direction and started a coffee company. We developed a revenue sharing model to stabilize the price that the farmers receive, and give them a predetermined percentage of the end price that we would get from the customer, and really in an effort to disrupt the coffee industry. So our initial plight was in coffee. We had desires to reach into tea and cocoa and other verticals in the future. We started a tea supply chain 2 years ago. And it was a grassroots effort. We bootstrapped the company for the first couple of years, and then landed a large enterprise customer here in Atlanta, Chick-fil-A, who's been an amazing partner to us. And we've gone on to have success with others. But in addition to that, because that is, work in the for-profit sector, it was important to me to show that you could actually do good while also making a profit. You don't have to make a choice. And I think that those of us that are planted in the business world and that are entrepreneurs or heads of for-profit businesses can make different decisions. That was a very important thing to me. However, I do also believe that we can give back without expecting anything in return. So 4 years ago, we started our own foundation. I heard it said this morning to just start small. Even if you can't, do something on the same scale as a company like Southwire, just start something. And that advice was given to me by a gentleman named Larry Cox, who headed up Chick-fil-A's foundations for a lot of years. And that resonated because I kept saying, well, one day when we've gotten to a certain point, I want to do X, and had these visions. But we started a foundation 4 years ago, and the work that has been done between our company on the for-profit side and the foundation together in concert with each other, and then with partnerships around the country has just been unbelievable. So I think now, what if I hadn't started that? What if I was continuing to wait until we were big enough to form a foundation and do something? Because we started it with really not a lot of money. It was just an idea, but money follows vision, and so that was a great move. So as quick as I know how to tell it, that's my little nutshell.
Great, thank you. 3 very unique organizations, 3 very exciting organizations that are doing incredible things in the communities that they work. However, there is kind of a common bond amongst the 3 of them. There's a recognition of the importance of work, the importance that work has in helping us as individuals recognize that it plays such an important role in our own human thriving. There also is a common theme of focusing on those who haven't been as fortunate as we have. The recognition that there are folks out there that need a helping hand, that need to be encouraged and supported along the way. And also the recognition of what it takes to get them into a position of being able to be self-sufficient. But I'm sure those journeys haven't been easy. I'd like each of you to maybe talk about the challenges that your organizations have faced in seeing the vision that you have become a reality. And what are some of maybe the lessons that you've learned? So, Michael, if you maybe kick us off with that.
Yeah, we don't have enough time today to talk about the challenges as we faced. But the couple that come to mind, I'd say that, we're in an interesting spot because we are a for-profit company with commercial products that are competing in the marketplace in a very cluttered and busy marketplace. And at a point where words like sustainability are being, I call them greenwashed, right? They're being used by every major company. They've got 100 different definitions, and sometimes they're authentic, and sometimes they're not. And so trying to find a way to clearly, it took me 5 minutes just to tell real briefly who we are, but in a consumer product type world, to convey a message of what we do. I could spend 2 hours, going deep on what we really do in communities and how it's changing families. And it is extremely difficult in a consumer-driven world where everybody's used to headlines and sound bites to convey authenticity and to help people know that you're really doing something right. There's a sticker called Fair Trade out there, and it sounds really good. And we get, the question all the time, oh, are you just like Fair Trade? And it takes a few minutes to explain, how we're different from that. So that's probably the biggest challenge we have. And then ultimately, when we do get past that and we've got a listening ear, changing buying patterns. It costs more money. If you're talking about commoditized products, we're decommoditizing products that have been, on either exchanges or auctions for decades, if not centuries. And that change doesn't happen quickly or easily. And so, we're trying to provide a product of quality and the ability to compete with other commercial brands that are out there and that are using the old buying practices and that are willing to opportunistically buy coffee when the markets drop and things like that. It makes it really tough because we get a customer that is absolutely dedicated to us all the way to the table where the price conversation happens, and then they want us to sell at the same price they're already buying commercial grade stuff for. And they're like, well, we really love it, but only if we can buy it for the same price we've always paid. And those two things don't go together. It's not possible. So, but that being said, we've still found clients where their values forward and they do make the decision. And we've had to learn to win on other levels too. You know, innovation is a core value, and we've got accounts where, you know, maybe the values weren't part of it, but through innovation and service, we won. So that's what comes to mind.
Great, thanks. Donell?
Yeah, we have spent a really long time reorienting ourselves as an organization to be one that partners with instead of one that does for, right? Or one that lords over or leads or commands the right strategy, especially in economic development. So it's meant for us, over the years, we've had to assess, program, and developments that we've done around jobs by way of is this best strategy for neighborhood, for place, and those that we're serving or creating jobs for. And so a hard part in that for us, or challenge, has been when we do that assessment and we learn from neighbor that entity really isn't of benefit to neighborhood and or to the flourishing and thriving of families within our neighborhood. And so we've had to wrestle with what do we do with that then, especially when those patrons or philanthropic arms that love and support those programs or those businesses are now on the line. And so we've had to make the hard decision to say, neighbor matters most, and what they desire is best and first. And if we are really about the flourishing and thriving of neighborhood as a whole, then we'll make those hard decisions. And so things like a thrift store that worked really well for years and that our suburban patrons loved and wanted to see stay because this was a legacy program, we made the hard decision to say goodbye to that. And then we really assessed and aligned with neighbors to discover that they needed grocery, so it was a food desert. And so we came up with some amazing strategies to address that need, but then also create jobs that would be entryway of what you were describing earlier to those soft skills, but also providing need for neighborhood and really, again, reweaving fabric of place for us.
Great, thanks. Brooke?
So I want to frame up my answer by saying, we invest and we're engaged in so many things across the entire state. And so today what I'm really going to represent is our workforce development efforts in the energy industry. And that has a really nice crossover, of course, with workforce for the state. Because, if we're getting a workforce ready, whether they come to work for us or anyone else, that's a good thing for everybody. So the barriers also, I agree, we could chat for a nice long time about that. Under the age of 18, background, drugs, wanting to work outside, being afraid of electricity, being afraid of heights. There's a cultural barriers. If you don't know about our industry and somebody comes to talk to you about it and you don't have a cousin, brother, uncle, friend that's been in it, that's going to seem really foreign to you. And so why would you be interested in that particular industry? We have some baseline employment testing, right? That's important for our industry standard, 8th grade math level, physical abilities test. Yes, we have tools and trucks, but it's a pretty physically demanding job, most of our skilled side of the house, which is where I've focused. So you need to be able to have the strength and ability to deliver on those skills. So the barriers are certainly there. Living in places that may be less desirable than others. So you may have grown up from somewhere, but you might have to move and go live a few other places before you can maybe resettle back home if our workforce needs align with where you'd like to live. So the barriers abound for sure, but I'd like to echo starting small. And that's a huge deal. We can't all be the big or hire 100 tomorrow, even the big ones in the space, because this really is delicate culture work, bringing in people from different backgrounds, experiences into an existing framework. And so it's got to be done in a very delicate and thoughtful way. So those are some of the barriers that we've struggled with. But through incredible leadership and teamwork, fantastic community partners, we've really been able to have some exciting outcomes, which I'll speak to a little bit later.
Great, thank you. In fact, to echo what Michael and Brooke both have said, in starting small, one of the companies that I was involved in did a lot of work with Georgia Power. And in that industry, you will see a trend to start with pilot projects. In other words, let's go out into the community and let's learn. Let's see what works, and let's understand what we can replicate and what we shouldn't replicate. And so there really is a lot of that goes on. When Tim Carney spoke earlier, he talked a bit about, social capital. We talk about the relational aspect of work. I know many of us, I know when I look back on my career, there's so many people that I built relationships with that were such a positive impact on my career throughout my life, that I could lean on, that I could talk with, that I could work with, learn from, be mentored by, whatever the case may be. And so work becomes more than just a place to earn a paycheck and a place to be from 9 to 5. It does have a much broader impact on our lives. And I'd like each of you to maybe speak a little bit to how you've seen in your efforts the relational nature of work, how your organizations may either promote that or recognize the importance of that in trying to drive towards success from a relational perspective. So, Donell, would you maybe kick us off a little bit with that?
Yeah, happy to. For us, being a faith-based nonprofit, that shows up, and we've had to learn how to be able to do that well in proximity to neighbor. But in this idea of work being a part of intrinsically tied to flourishing, for us, we approach that through the lens of all humanity being image bearers of Creator. So with that, you bear broken and whole. You bear the inherent capacity to be full participants in your own flourishing and thriving, the work of being successful, right? And so we lead with that when we think about work and relationship and how you enter into that, whether for us as neighbor and or as organization that owns the grocery store, the coffee shop, the cafe, the bike shop, the restaurant, we're always leading with dignity and identity through this lens that you show up bearing this inherent capacity to be full participants, and that it is not something that we're bringing to you, handing your way, necessarily needing to teach, that there's mutuality in that, right? That we are positioning ourselves as image bearers to learn as well. And that allows us in work, in training, the learning of the soft skills, executing those soft skills, coming back around to talk about how do you enhance them, right? And then above and beyond that, right? Just how we interact with one another, and on both of the economic development side and then in office side, right? But then how do you do that with customer and person that is your neighbor? And so for us, leading with this idea that each of us are image bearers, it levels playing field, and it allows us, whether boss, CEO, the high end of organization to entry level, to see one another as equal and through our humanity.
Great. Brooke, some thoughts on that?
There we go. I forgot my 1 second lead. Absolutely. Social capital is huge. And at Georgia Power, we're a family. Our company is a family. At least I very much feel that way. Been there 11 years and can just, call on countless experiences where we've shown up for each other. And so letting, somebody in the community who hasn't had an experience like that, certainly an employment experience like that is really important. And to your point about mutuality, it's important for both sides. So the recruitment programs that we do, the interns that we offer, the technical colleges and the high schools that we partner with. We are very, very intentional about choosing leaders within our company that are a good fit to be a part of that work. And we bring everyone along the journey together. There is no Brooke or there is nobody in HR going out and doing activities and bringing people into the business. It is very much a teamwork approach because we believe in that. Because they're going to be the ones doing safety sensitive work, very hard and exhausting work and dangerous conditions. So it's no more important than on our skilled side that there are people working alongside each other that have mutual trust and respect and can draw on that social capital from each other to help each other out in a time of need, to give somebody's kid a summer job, whatever it may be, all the way down to those soft skills. Many of our distribution supervisors pick these kids up, drop them off, take them to go get their steel-toed boots, and are still in touch with them many years later if they're not employed with us. And it's a really beautiful relationship to kind of see unfold. And it helps show them those things that they might not see at home about how to show up every day on time and look in the eye and shake a hand. Many of the things I've heard mentioned earlier, it helps build their social capital network. And that's just a wonderful side benefit of hopefully getting them into a really good job with us or someone else in the energy industry.
Great, thanks. Michael?
Yeah, so for us, we're in an industry that historically is commoditized, right? So it's about transactions. And I heard it said this morning, the juxtaposition between relationships and transactions. And so it just happened to be coffee and tea that was the business that I started. It was only ever a vehicle. That was a vehicle for us to earn relationships with people and to find ways to build into their lives. And so the reason we started the ThriveWorks Foundation was to take the relationships deeper. And so we've done on the for-profit side of the business, we've sat around tables with farmers and customers and had conversations that typically have never occurred in our industry. And the farmers have reveled in that because even the largest buyers today use intermediaries as ombudsmen to go and make purchases for them. And so there is no relationship. The relationships are only local at that first level, and the farmers are producing things that they never see again. They don't know where it goes. They don't know what happens to it. And we've, our earliest products actually had their faces on the bag, and we take their bags back to them and show them their coffee with their face on the bag. We've had to scale, past that, but I think those formed these incredible foundational bonds. And I remember we first started walking up, and we visit, Guatemala, and we'd walk up and we'd give these guys hugs, and they're kind of like, whoa, what are you doing in my space? And, it just wasn't something they were accustomed to, right? We were just trying to, be warm. And fast forward 8-9 years later, I took one of our board members down, and he brought his son. And before I could get out of the car, they'd already walked up. And one of the farmers that I remember being so stiff early on, he approached, introduced himself, and reached in and hugged both my friend and his son unprompted. And so I just saw it was a glimpse, I think, one of those whispers that God gives you sometimes, and it was a glimpse of what's possible and the effort that had been mined and poured into. And so, and I can tell you the conversations we've had around those tables now are rich. We've done service projects. Many of those communities have never engaged in service projects before. It was foreign. It wasn't something they knew. And so we've gotten together and with customers and with them, and we've painted schools. And then born out of that have been ideas and projects by kids in the community because it was catching, right? It was this idea that, we're here to serve others. And when we serve others, we feel great and things happen. And so, everything we do has been because of relationships, and that's the only reason we do what we do. I'm a foodie guy, so yeah, it's fun to get to live in the coffee and tea world, and I do love coffee and tea, and that's a cool thing. But frankly, that wasn't the calling of my heart. It just happened to be the way we did it.
Great, thank you. That's terrific. Randy, I'm going to need a hug after this, so just know that. Yeah, thank you. So when Randy was talking with Heather earlier, they talked a lot about measurements and outcomes. And so it doesn't really matter what type of business or organization we're in, whether we have donors, whether we have investors, whether we have customers, whether you're a team playing here and you have fans. Everybody wants the ability to measure and understand how you're doing. If I'm donating, what kind of results are you getting? If I'm investing, what kind of return? So can each of you maybe briefly speak to how do you think about within your organization the measurements that are kind of key and critical to understanding that you're moving your vision in the right direction? Brooke?
Sure. So, hearing Heather talk, that's the plight we've been in. Of course, certainly we have our foundation and other types of investments that we make. How do you measure ROI on giving a nonprofit some amount of dollars? And then, especially if they're statewide or have many chapters, how do you figure that out? I'm looking at Jessica, right? We're big partners with Voices for Georgia's Children, and they're one of our really great partners in that. But for me, in the workforce development space, of course, it's about that impact. So when I think about numbers, we had a huge recruitment event out at our training facility in Lithonia. We had about 125 kids show up over 2 days. We invited all of them to interview because, again, back to social capital and that experience, getting dressed up, coming to a building downtown, shaking hands, participating in a formal interview process. We had about 30 participate in that. From that, we had about 15 who spent the summer with us in some sort of internship capacity. And then now we have 6 who we are helping to scholarship to a program that directly relates with a career opportunity to coming back and working for us or in the energy industry, where this is a team sport. We have a national and a state consortia focused on energy industry workforce, which is a huge help. So those are some numbers. But then, you really think about the story of Andre Person, who graduated from MLK High School in 2007, wasn't really sure what he wanted to do, thought about going into the military. His family didn't really want him to go that direction. And an employee from Georgia Power spoke in his class, in his electronics class. And he got invited to participate in an internship. And then he was invited to go down for the scholarship process. And now Andre is a supervisor with us, providing very well for his family. He has several employees and is a go-to amazing leader. And of course, is one of my favorite colleagues to call on to speak to audiences like this. So it's kind of both. You've got to have that ROI. And for the businesses in the room, I know we're all trying to crack that nut. For the nonprofits, I know you're trying to figure out how can I convince my donor that this is the best ROI for whatever investment. But for us, it's really about those stories as well. So it's a balance.
Yeah, great. Michael, how about from your perspective?
Yeah, so for one aspect, a for-profit company, there's pretty traditional measures of scorekeeping, right? So that's one way, but it gets tougher, right? Because I came out of my prior world, we were private equity backed, and metrics and expectations were very distinct and very high. Some of that gets traded when you're in a social impact model and you've got multiple ways to measure. So we've got the traditional things that you would expect in a corporation, and we view that as a stewardship issue, and we've treated it as such, and we've been profitable for quite a few years. But we've been forced to go and figure out what other metrics, what hard metrics can we point to, because people, stakeholders of all sorts need tangible things to point to. So we had to go and benchmark. We had to go and do the hard work to figure out what were the other viable avenues for coffee to be sold in markets where we're doing business, and make sure that we were right sizing those numbers. And finally, came up with numbers that said, hey, we're delivering 350% more net income to the farmer on average. And there's examples, that are better, but we felt comfortable that was a conservative metric that we could stand on. We've seen on our foundation side that the money that we put in, and we've primarily, funded the startup of it, but we've invited other partners to participate. And when we do that, we're getting a 10-to-1 ratio on the money that we put in. So we're able to justify that we take money out of our profits that would have hit our bottom line and we put into the foundation. But when we do that, we're able to make things happen. When partners come and join us, that are then multiplying 10x or more. So we feel like, that's a pretty solid investment.
Great return.
And so, and then there are a lot of soft metrics, right? I mean, we've had letters written from, teenagers who battled really difficult circumstances and have now found purpose. There's a litany of other things. And so there's a range that, starts with the hard metrics, but then, you have to be willing to look at soft factors too. And at some level it becomes more of a, it's a conviction as a leadership group. Are we on the right path? Are we discerning that this is the thing we should be focused on?
Great, thank you. Donell?
So we've struggled with best practices for 40 years, right? As a faith-based nonprofit, you are, and as a nonprofit, you feel beholden to your patrons and the philanthropic arm, right, and fundraising. And so there is a world and industry that helps you figure out how to effectively convey those right numbers, right, to those persons. And over the years, we've discovered that wasn't the best way of measuring what vision and mission is for us. And so we've moved strategically with the development of consultancy to measurement tools that really help us measure economic, social, and structural categories. And within them, there are 12 indicators of what a flourishing neighborhood and place looks like. And we do it through three ways: through assessing people and place, to finding alignment with people, and then through activation in the third. And it really helps us get, coming out of the formal city planning world, those tools that give you data, census tract, get you high, just above ground level. And this tool for us is really getting to that granular level of understanding of what success and flourishing really looks like, whether mixed income housing for us in place or economic development or neighborhood engagement. And we do that tool on a continuum every 2 to 3 years. It helps us understand deep data around qualitative and quantitative around flourishing and thriving in place.
Great, thank you. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but there is just one question that I thought it was the very first question that was asked. Michael, how would you talk with someone who wanted to get involved with your foundation? I thought that was a great question.
Yeah, so Mike Menina is here with us. He heads up the foundation, and you could corral him before he gets to the lunch line. But in all honesty, thriveworks.org, and works is with an X, so thrive, WORX.org, has a contact form and has the ability to engage there. So either say hello to Mike or go to the website.
Great, thank you. Well, these are three incredible organizations. I would encourage all of you to jump online and do some research about the work that they are doing and the support they are providing to our communities. It is really unbelievable. Having been in the energy sector, a lot of times people think about a big utility. You only think about them if your lights go off. But what you don't recognize is the investment that they make in our state and in our communities is tremendous. Many programs are truly supported by the work that they do and the volunteerism that their employees make. So I'd like you, if you wouldn't mind, giving our panel a round of applause.